Hi all. Last week we talked about how through Jesus we shine God's light into the world. But if you were a Jewish listener on the Mount listening to Jesus' sermon that day, you might well have noticed that he was talking about becoming kingdom people, he was talking about the coming reign of God, but hadn't mentioned the law of Moses. How can kingdom people be without the law? And Jesus answers this concern immediately in Matthew 5:17. He says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." Now, when Jesus refers to the law and the prophets, he's speaking about the entire Old Testament, both what we would call the rules bits and the narrative bits as well, both of which combined provide the reader with the wisdom of God and reveals the way that God was bringing about his kingdom through the very story of Israel. But here's what's incredible. Jesus didn't come to replace the law, he came to fulfill it. He was the promised king that Israel had been waiting for, promised in the Old Testament scriptures. His life, death, and resurrection were the ultimate completion of everything the law and the story of Israel pointed toward. Every prophecy, every sacrifice, every command, it all finds its true meaning and fulfillment in him. Jesus makes it clear that the law is not disappearing. He says, "Truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." This means that God's standards don't change. His righteousness is unshakable. However, Jesus then gives a shocking statement. "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." Now, this would have stunned the audience. The Pharisees were known for their extreme dedication to the law of Moses given by God. They memorized the scripture, they performed every religious duty and made sure to follow even the smallest rules. They even made up a bunch of rules to ensure they were following the rules best. But if they weren't righteous enough, what hope did anyone else have? And the answer lies in what Jesus is teaching. True righteousness isn't just about outward obedience, it's about a transformed heart. The Pharisees focused on external rule keeping, but Jesus calls his followers to something deeper, a greater Eden ideal, a righteousness that flows from true communion with him. And this greater righteousness, as he calls it, is Jesus' own righteousness that stands between a believer and the requirements of the law. Paul echoes this idea in Ephesians 2:8 and 9. He says, "For it is by grace that you have been saved through faith. This is not from yourselves, it is a gift from God, not by works, so that no one can boast." And yet, here there is a tension, because Jesus also requires that his followers must not just accept his gift of grace, but that they would follow him and do as he did. As John reminds us in 1 John 2:3 and 4, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, "Oh, I know him," but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. And so we find this intentional tension between the two ideas in the gospel story. We are saved by grace through faith in Jesus. We cannot earn that righteousness on our own. And yet our faith is proven by how we live. True belief leads to obedience. Jesus then gives practical examples that show what this kind of righteousness looked like. And it shows us that the law of Moses was in Jesus' mind a concession. It was not the ideal, but it was meant to point us toward the ideal. And Jesus takes it one step further. Murder, he says, isn't just about physically killing someone, it's about the heart. Jesus says that even anger, insults, and contempt for other people put us in danger of judgment. If we look down on others or hold grudges, we are already walking down a dangerous path. Adultery isn't just about the physical act, it starts in the heart. looking at someone with lust is already dishonoring them and breaking the purity that God calls us to. Jesus wants us to be pure not just in action, but also in thought. Similarly, divorce was being misused in the day to control women. But Jesus restores the value of marriage. He calls people back to God's original design for marriage, which was a lifelong commitment built on love and faithfulness. And all three of these case studies, if you will, point to the fact that to be righteous, we need to see other people as image bearers of God himself and to honor them as such. What's the big message here? See, God isn't just interested in our outward obedience. He wants our hearts. Jesus is showing us that the law was never just about rules. It was about pointing us to a deeper relationship with God, a deeper rightness with him, a rightness of relationship with other people as well. And here's the incredible truth. We can't meet God's standard on our own, but Jesus has already done it for us. And so what does this mean for us today? Well, our job isn't just to believe the story of Jesus, it's also to live it. Because when we walk closely with him, his righteousness becomes ours, and from that point on, everything changes.